You guys, these days typing feels like an absolute necessity, and anything slower than fastest just doesn't feel fast enough when we're dealing with hustle culture. So sometimes I've thought of handwriting as almost a luxury. You get your nice pens, you get your nice paper, and it's something to do as a hobby on the side and not something that is sustainable or even really welcome in a fast paced society. We're kind of almost evolving beyond that, if you will. And this is really fascinating. I started doing more research into this phenomenon of handwriting and realizing that handwriting actually changes our brains in a way that's absolutely insane. So I'm going to dive into all of that today in this podcast. I'm really excited to share some of the things I've been learning and the studies that I've been reading and the different scientific websites I've been looking at to research something that is so common in our lives, but I think underappreciated, at least by just for how I didn't realize how much it could help us. But before I get into that, I want to welcome you back to Magic in the Ordinary. Welcome to this series in particular. Every Monday, I want to share a magic of moment, and I want to look at absolutely amazing things in our everyday life. So I'm going to have links below in case you would like to begin your own research and deep dive into a topic. And so I'm also going to give a challenge at the end of each video and provide a habit for myself to try to follow, but also anyone else who's interested in doing that as well, because I think it's good to take the knowledge that we've gained and then transform our lives through that. So I'm really excited to share this new series with you guys as well. And all right, let's talk about handwriting. I'd encourage you to pick up your pen or your pencil while you're listening to this or watching this, and maybe a notebook as well if you want to put down notes. That helps me. It makes me more engaged in things. But um, I want to give five scientific reasons or five things that people have found that have are ways that handwriting just incredibly helps us as human beings and why it should just not be taken for granted at all. So number one, writing by hand builds fine motor skills. And this is something that seems fairly straightforward. According to the National Library of Science, National Library of Medicine, writing requires extreme precision, quote, extreme precision. So look at the pen in your hands. In order to keep the pen in the proper position, every single muscle around the pen needs to be applying the exact amount of pressure that it needs to hold this thing correctly. And then when you begin to write symbols, what actually happens is the pressure needs to change just right, minutely, in each muscle in order to create the correct signal or the correct symbol that gives us the meaning that we want. Each of these individual characters actually takes incredible fine motor skills, and it's constantly changing. We're not just drawing a bunch of circles. There's always these evolving lines and things like that that we have to be thinking about. So there's actually a cognitive neuroscience, Mariek Longcamp, that says, quote, handwriting is probably among the most complex motor skills that the brain is capable of, end quote. So this is not just a fine motor skill that or writing is not just a fine motor skill, but it is like the fine motor skill, like one of the most complex that we can engage in, which I think is kind of funny because in my head writing is always just like a basic skill, like you need to learn how to write in school, but it's actually one of the most complex things we can engage in. That begs the question, what if we don't plan on becoming a master penman and we don't really feel like we really need to have the writing skills? Well, those fine motor skills that we learn with penmanship do bleed over into other areas of our life. There are new researching studies. I didn't have, there weren't any completed yet, but scientists are starting to theorize that potentially not having the fine motor skills that come with writing could impact sports coordination and the muscle development overall, and that your brain needs to know how to do. So sports might suffer. And in addition to that, any of my friends out there who are artists, handwriting seems like a really effective way to develop more muscular control for your artwork. So handwriting can help us express ourselves, not just with the words that we're writing, but actually develop skills that we need to have when we're trying to draw what we want to be drawing or painting or whatever our craft is. So in addition to the muscular side of these things, the fine motor skills don't just end with physical benefits. They actually seem to impact our brains. So for one thing, students who are taught handwriting are a lot better at reading, which makes total sense. Creating patterns with our hands seems to help our minds recognize those patterns when we just see them other places. And in addition to actually just the repetition of us creating them, you um, you are actually seeing more nuanced versions. I don't draw an A perfectly every single time, but that helps me recognize a less perfect A in other places as well. So it helps us have more nuanced approach to the letters, and then because of that, also be able to recognize them more quickly whenever we do see them. Um, there's a quote, handwriting activates a broader network of brain regions. So it turns out that these fine motor skills light up our brains like a Christmas tree. Like it helps us build these associations, mind body association, and that cognitively really helps us. Like, have you ever had a big test and you decided to act something out, um, and then you remembered it better? And this actually is going to lead to our second point. Point number two, why handwriting is amazing. It's not just because of the fine motor skills, but also because writing by hand enhances your memory. So to the test analogy, I don't know if you've ever had a big test that you were, had finals for, and you kind of put some actions to whatever it was you were studying to um, hopefully memorize that material. In my head, I'm like, maybe I'm the only one that does basically interpretive dance on finals during finals week, but the point is that motion can help memory, and that's something that I think a lot of us are familiar with. It's a strategy that we kind of are aware of, but actions can help us remember things. There's something about mind body connection that gives our brains a boost, and writing is similar to that. We're not acting things out, but our bodies are physically moving the words, and it's getting ingrained in our brains in a different way. And there are pictures of our brains lighting up when we're typing versus when we're writing, and writing just has a lot more light going on, and that is going to help us put things into memory. According to Scientific America, there have been vast numbers of studies showing that memory is boosted when you produce something tangible. And a large part of our visomotor network is enacted, and this impacts memory being encoded as well. So, yeah, our brain lighting up is going to help us memorize whatever it is that we are taking down, which is another plus. Another reason handwriting helps memory is not just that physical contact and that brain body connection, but actually because handwriting is harder than typing. So the ease of typing seems to make it superior in some ways, but it can be done so quickly. People talk about it processing, it's not even processing information, it goes through our ears and out our fingertips, I think is one of the quotes. I'll try to pull up where that's from. But basically, when we slow down and write things, it gives our minds a time to process the information. Faster actually doesn't equal better when we're trying to memorize things. So slowing down is actually the key to better, stronger memory retention. So you do have to slow down a bit when you're writing. You're thinking about the materials, you're pulling out the most important points. And most people write paraphrase notes of the content they're listening to in order to save time. While you're paraphrasing these notes, you may not realize it, but you're actually taking ownership of the material. So I want to move on to the next point, where it's not just memory and our fine motor skills, but I actually want to talk about comprehension. That's right. The third point is handwriting actually increases our ability to comprehend things, which is nuts, and it's beautiful. So when you write things by hand, you understand the content better. And according to the National Library of Medicine, the effort of forming letters improves retention and comprehension. Writing, again, it just requires a slight slowdown that gives our brains time to process the information and think through it. And this sitting down and thinking of like, okay, what's the most important points? What am I going to put down on my piece of paper? I can't write as fast as they're talking, maybe, but I can put down the most important points. That processing the information helps us understand it better. Yes, but in addition to that, it also helps us think critically about it. What points? It's helping, our brains are already organizing things and saying, do we like this information? What's going into my brain? What's going on with it? And it boosts critical thought from what they've seen in studies. We're not mindlessly putting it down. Well, let's hop right on to the next point, because it's not just comprehension that gets boosted when we're working tangibly with the material, and we're looking at these things. And the fourth point is that handwriting can boost creativity. So this makes so much sense. If our brains are lighting up like crazy and there's all these synapses firing and we're dealing with tangible things, we're not just going to see a boost in comprehension, but actually the creativity of our minds is going to get that boost along with those synapses firing as well. With writing in particular, you're able to, you're aiming for very specific shapes, but Your exact outcome is going to vary depending on your unique fine motor skills and your cognitive understanding. So the flexibility of handwriting things actually gives space to kind of have our own personalities, our own style, even our own current mood, our own individual current mood. So your writing is shaped by your creative mind. In addition to this, the style of writing you go with is often impacted by the culture around you. There's this really cool quote I found. Quote, writing involves producing unique shapes that require individual attention and creativity, reflecting the gradual development of symbolic communication over millennia, end quote. So it's kind of born out of a culture that you're a part of, but also expressing yourself uniquely. And there are growing concerns among the scientific community that I was reading about, that they're worried that actually nuances that have been passed down in cultures and families are going to be stamped out because of the rigid form of typing and the rise of the digital age, which is something I had never thought about. But it's fascinating to think about, I guess, because handwriting just has all of these benefits added that I hadn't thought about before. And that conversation about creativity and the nuance of individual writing brings me to the final point of why I think handwriting is so important. And that is the beauty of authenticity. Handwriting is a way to be more authentic. So a lot of studies show that people are self-conscious about their handwriting, and they don't want it to be embarrassed about how bad their writing is. And the keyboard provides an escape route for them. Instead of the laborious task of trying to improve your handwriting, you can just turn to technology and it's going to make it a lot better, a lot faster. Unfortunately, the technology crutch for those fine motor skills being lost is just going to lead to further deterioration of them. And it's going to completely eliminate that personality that can come through with writing. Researchers have started being a little bit concerned with digital writing lacking the authenticity and self-expression, potentially even loss of personality in a person's cultural and familiar heritage, which is kind of a lot from that. But to back up a little bit, the size of the letters you write, the pressure that you apply, the slant, even the spacing you use can all give insight into your personality and say something about your personality. Now, I've been looking for studies. There are no studies. Scientists have not determined what elements of writing determine what kind of personality. So you can't look at someone and say, oh, I think they are, or there's no scientific backing, at least that I could find, for somebody looking at someone's writing and saying, oh, I can tell that they're a very creative person just by how they form their C's or something like that. So science doesn't have that yet. And I'd be curious to hear if there's any anecdotal evidence on that, if people can read that. But the studies I found, there wasn't any evidence for it. But they all across the board agreed that your writing does say something about your personality and even your mental health state, your these kinds of things. So I did see a lot of calls for studies where people want to go deeper and research this more because they think that this could help us diagnose people better, it could help us give more specific care. And so scientists are wondering, like, or at least the researchers I was looking at, they were starting to ask questions of like, how could we dig deeper into this? Which would be fascinating to say, like, our writing could really help us help other people in a whole different way. And all of that is lost with a keyboard. A keyboard kind of brings conformity. Each each letter that you make is made by the same kind of stroke of a button. So that is all kind of blended. That's all lost. All the individuality and personality and even your mental health signs are all getting lost in a keyboard. This is inconsistent with the imperfect but beautiful uniqueness of human beings. I think we are physical, imperfect human beings, and we all have a unique way of writing. And maybe some of us would argue we have an even more nuanced slash unique way than others, but that's where we're at. I think this brings us to a really cool truth that we are embodied human beings. We are not just minds, we are also bodies. And so living in that reality, using our fine motor skills, building that mind body connection is really super healthy for us, but also real. It's authentic. And while the digital world is beckoning us to get lost in, colorful images and all these different things, perfect writing and flawless, edited pictures, staying grounded in tangible things can be tough, but I think it's always been a part of being human. And these studies are showing us that it's still a part of being a healthy human. So handwriting seems to be a really beautiful part of staying healthy with our fine motor skills, our memory, our comprehension, our creativity, our yeah, critical thought, and even our being authentic. So I would also add that handwriting is part of the joy of being human, authentically human. You get to, if you're able to choose notebooks and paper textures that best suit your needs and pair them with fun pens and pencils, like I love going to Hobby Lobby or Blick and stuff, that can bring joy, I think, as well. And I get that it's also a gift to be able to write. So fully recognizing that just absolute joy of being able to pick up a pen and write is, I think, part of the equation as well. All right. So to sum up, handwriting can improve your fine motor skills, build better memory, give you a sharper mind, boost your creativity, and deepen your authenticity, which all sounds great. But in a computer written world, we've got some problems. So I want to look at three of those problems. Number one, what if your handwriting is awful? Or what if my handwriting is awful? And this is, there's only one thing to do at that point, I think, and that is practice. Actually, first, you celebrate because you're the best candidate. You can build fine motor skills and you can actually grow in handwriting confidence. So, every single article I've read on handwriting emphasize that this is an incredibly complex acquired skill. It is not an easy one for anybody. And the struggle is partly where the benefits come from. That's why our brains are lighting up because they're trying to deal with all these things that are difficult for us. So we can actually, if it's hard for us, we can turn our struggle into a strength and pick up the pen and start practicing that. And this is something I've been thinking about because my handwriting it varies greatly from day to day. There have been times where I'm interviewing people with show notes and I actually look down at my notebook and I can't read my writing. So I'm like, oh, I guess I'll just skip on to the next question. So it's hard. Handwriting, especially depending on the day, our different moods, it can be hard to write beautifully all the time, but practice is going to give us those benefits and it's going to light up our brains and help boost all those good things. The other question is, what if I'm more productive when I'm typing? And this is, I think, it's a relevant question I don't want to just ignore. And I think I would answer with the question, what am I doing this for? I type at work because the purpose at work is to get things done and produced as quickly and as efficiently as possible. So I do a lot of typing there. I also type drafts of books after I have brainstorm them, often on paper, because I want to get that material into a format that's easily editable and shareable. So I want to make sure that that is in the digital sphere so that I can move it and get things processed and things like that. But outside of the productive things I need done, I want to think about make space for also just living my best life. And I don't want to miss out on memory boost and creativity and critical thought that comes with handwriting. So I think balance is essentially the answer. I enjoy journaling each night. I love taking notes on podcasts. I'm trying now to bring around a little notebook that I use instead of my notes app on my phone, just to try to do as much as I can with writing where it makes sense. It's kind of shifting from quantity output to just pure quality of the life that we're living. And so I think it might not feel productive as first, but I feel like my productivity actually has skyrocketed since I've done more handwriting. And I think that's really cool to see that as well. It just makes sense. It all ties together. And then the third question I want to ask, is typing evil? And no, I don't think it is at all. I think honestly, using a keyboard actually still does light up our brain. It just isn't as bright. There's not as many regions that are lit up, and there's slightly different regions as well. They're not all overlapped. So I think it has a place. I think it can help productivity, but it just simply does not interact with our brains the same way that handwriting does. It's not as complex. You are doing something with your brain. You just aren't doing quite as much. It's not as hard and it's not as slow. So it's also not as complex or helpful. Again, back to balance. It's interesting to me because people always talk about journaling and how it's so good for you to process at the end of the day. You should sit down and you should journal your thoughts. And it's after reading all of these studies, I've really come to see that I don't think it's just the act of processing through your day. It's actually like they're talking about tangibly touching paper seems to do something to our brains that help is helpful. Holding a pen is helpful. Just the tangible experience as well as the processing side, it can be really, really helpful. So there are some psychologists I saw who are asking questions like, could we make this into more of an intentional therapy, that physical mental connection to actually help people overcome certain mental difficulties that they're going through? And I was like, yeah, we can start therapy today. Like we'll just start writing. That sounds great to me. So this brings us to our challenge for the week. I'll start with the easiest version and go to the harder challenges. So the challenge baseline challenge is to incorporate 5 minutes of writing in a notebook daily. Simple habit, major transformation. You get boosted memory, creativity, develop your fine motor skills, all those things you just heard about. So you can journal every day. I think even taking notes on a podcast can be helpful. Whatever you'd like to do, you are reaping the benefits of this beautiful handwriting that we're talking about. Now, do you want an additional challenge? I saw a study that said old people got started improving their symptoms of dementia after they started Chinese calligraphy. So, one option, or option two, I guess, is to just pick up a new language script and have fun with it. You don't, just make something beautiful. And I think that sounds kind of fun. But if you're not into Hangul or Hanja or and any of the other, picking up a new script and just checking it out, there is a third version, which is to do cursive. Now, I'm going to be real with you. I did not love cursive growing up, but I was really fascinated by the studies I was reading that show that this may even have a stronger effect on your brain because you need additional control to connect all of the letters together. So the National Library of Medicine says, quote, from a neurocognitive perspective, cursive writing is more fluid and continuous, or a more fluid and continuous motor activity, engaging different neural circuits than block letters. Research suggests that cursive writing involves greater activation of the motor cortex and cerebellum, as it requires fine motor coordination and smooth transition between words. This fluidity enhances memory retention and cognitive engagement, as the writer must anticipate the next letter in a continuous motion. End quote. That all sounds great to me. And so they're saying essentially all of the great things we've been talking about with handwriting have been totally boosted. All of those effects are even greater when you're doing cursive, which sounds great. If you are like me and you're like not a huge fan of standardized American cursive that they often teach in school books, I would recommend looking at some of the older fonts, or just even some different fonts that you might be, find interesting. For example, I found like old style copperplate, and I think it's gorgeous. So I don't know if I'll be writing in my journal just like full blown copperplate, but I will probably sit down and just practice the shapes for a little while because I think they're gorgeous. They're like art forms. So it's kind of pulling two worlds together, art and handwriting, into the same one. So that, if that sounds interesting to you, yeah, definitely give it a try. Get a dip pen, get a feather quill, just have fun with it. I think is part of the key. So thank you guys for listening to this. Small changes can have such an insanely beautiful and incredible impact. So I want to say thank you. We're going to continue looking at the magic of the ordinary things in the world around us, but handwriting is just something so beautiful that I've always loved, but never realized there was so much scientific backing for how much it helped us become healthier, smarter, just living life fully. So this week, let's be mighty. Let's pick up the pen, and I'll see you next time.